They tried to crush you beneath the weight of their fear, not knowing you were pressure born, a storm forged in silence, sharpened by pain, and armored in the very shadows that once tried to swallow you. You were not meant to conform. You were meant to confront. Not to bend but to break the rules written by cowards who mistook your scars for weakness. They saw ashes. You became the inferno. They built walls. You grew wings. You rise not in spite of the dark, but because of it, and now you walk through fire, not to survive, but to set the world ablaze with your truth. They wanted you broken, not just shattered on the surface but undone from within, hollowed out, left in pieces small enough to be ignored, but sharp enough to cut yourself on if you ever tried to gather them back. And for a moment, maybe longer than a moment, you believed it. You listened when they said you were too much, then not enough. You let the silence swallow your voice, let their opinions echo louder than your own heartbeat. You walked through days like a ghost, present, but never really there. And every time you looked in the mirror, you saw remnants of someone trying to remember what it felt like to be whole. But here's the truth. They didn't know what they were dealing with. They thought their cruelty was a hammer, that they could pound you into dust. They never expected that dust to rise. Black fire doesn't scream when it burns, it devours. In silence, in shadows, in the places that never needed light to survive. You weren't just reborn. You clawed your way out of yourself, out of every version of you that begged for mercy. You scorched the past and stood in the ashes, not golden, not gleaming, but darkened and defiant. A phoenix that doesn't rise in glory, but in vengeance. Not to be admired, but to be reckoned with. They expected a crash, a fracture, a clean break they could walk away from. But you didn't fall, you descended. And in that bottomless pit, where light had forgotten your name, you found something deeper than pain. You found the parts of you that were never afraid to suffer. You found instinct, fire, fury, flight. You learned to fly not through skies of hope but through storms built from every lie they fed you. Through winds laced with your own screams, through lightning that traced the fault lines of your soul. You became aerodynamic with grief, weightless with rage, untethered from needing anyone's permission to rise. And now, when they look at you, they flinch, but they don't understand why. They feel it, even if they can't name it. That chill behind their spine when you walk into the room. That silence when your eyes meet theirs. You carry something ancient now, something not even the fire could erase. Because when you learn to fly in the dark, you stop fearing the fall. You start craving it. Each descent is no longer a threat but a choice. A transformation. A ritual of rebirth where pain isn't punishment, it's power. And you're not broken. You're the proof that the dark doesn't always destroy. Sometimes, it rebuilds you. They wrapped you in chains thinking you'd choke, that the weight would grind your will to dust. But what they never considered was that you've been carrying heavier things your whole life. Guilt, silence, rage held too long in your throat. So when they bound your hands, They only gave your fists a reason to clench tighter. Every shackle they designed to hold you down, you turned it into armor. A blade. Ammunition. You didn't escape. You evolved. Every restriction became a lesson in resistance. Every limit became a blueprint for rebellion. You didn't beg for freedom, you bent the bars until they screamed. And when they tried to write your story with rules drenched in control, you didn't just refuse to follow. You flipped the table. You wrote in blood, fire, and the ink of your own rewritten identity. They handed you pages filled with commands. You burned them. From the ashes, you carved your own language, a creed with no permission required. You were never made to follow. You were built to fracture systems that depended on silence. While they clung to old power titles, wealth, hierarchies, you cracked the code. Real power isn't inherited. It's seized, moment by bloody moment, born in solitude and carved from the marrow of your darkest nights. They thought power was control. You knew the truth. Power is becoming untouchable by the very forces that try to destroy you. You built something that doesn't bow. A world where your name echoes not for what it conformed to but for what it defied. Every no they gave you, you melted it down and recast it into a sword. Every door they slammed shut, you didn't wait for it to reopen. You kicked it from its hinges, walked in, and rewrote the rules of engagement. And that prison they thought you'd rot in, you studied its blueprint. You learned its rhythms. Then you cracked the floor, turned the shadows into scaffolding, and climbed. Now you dance where they buried you. You laugh in the dark. You thrive in it. Because this isn't a prison anymore. It's a forge. It's a battleground that became your sanctuary. A wasteland that became your kingdom. Now, chains don't bind you. They remind you that nothing they give you, not pain, not loss, not darkness, will ever be enough to end you. In fact, it only calls up the next version of you. And you're not done rising yet. They never understood what the darkness meant to you. They assumed it was a wound, a weakness, a waiting room for the broken. But you didn't just endure the shadows, you drank them, breathed them in until they pulsed through your veins like liquid defiance. You didn't adapt to the dark. You claimed it. You reshaped it like molten steel. Turned it into armor, into weaponry, into a force that answered to no god, no man, no memory that dared to haunt you. Because silence was never your surrender, it was your sharpening. Every time they tried to mute your voice, thinking they'd snuff you out like some whisper too fragile for the storm, they only made the winds blow louder through your soul. You listened to their ridicule, took it like blade after blade after blade, and forged it all into your own anthem. Now, when you speak, it's not with words, it's with echoes of every time you bit your tongue and bled dignity into the void. They turned their backs, but you learned to move without applause, without validation. You dug deeper, clawing past fear, past shame, past everything they told you to bury. And what you found there wasn't peace. It was power, raw, cold, unrelenting, the kind that doesn't ask permission to exist. So when they came again, with louder judgments, sharper lies, crueler intentions, they didn't find someone waiting for rescue. They found someone who thrives under pressure, who doesn't break anymore because the breaking already happened. And it birthed something brutal, something sacred, something unstoppable. You were never a seed meant to sprout gently in the sun. You were buried beneath judgment, under silence, in a coffin of expectations, and you exploded through that soil like vengeance incarnate. You weren't born to bloom. You were born to rise through concrete, through grief, through everything that was never meant to let you breathe. And now, everything they used to control you becomes yours to command. Their fear? You wear it like a crown. Their doubt? You grind it into dust with your footsteps. The rules they swore were unbreakable. You bend them with a glance. You don't just live in the dark. You rule there. You don't just survive storms. You summon them. And now, standing at the edge of the next abyss, you are no longer afraid of falling. Because every fall has taught you how to land without shattering, how to rise without ceremony, how to become your own damn resurrection. They held up a mold rigid, cold, approved by generations of fear, and expected you to shrink into it. Smile in place. Speak less. Dream smaller. They built a world so desperate for control that it mistook conformity for peace. But you were never made to fit. You didn't arrive in this life to dim yourself for the comfort of cowards. You weren't designed to blend into beige systems or apologize for how loud your presence feels in a quiet room. They didn't want you whole. They wanted you manageable, approachable, predictable. Something they could summarize in a sentence and forget in a moment. But you showed them that the moment you start contorting yourself to survive their world, you're already dead in spirit. Because true freedom, it's savage. It's feral. It doesn't come wrapped in politeness or adorned with approval. It comes when you look at the rules written by people who never lived your life and decide to erase them with your existence. You didn't fit into their world. You remade it with your breath. You bent the bars of their reality until it warped into something unrecognizable, and then you stood in the wreckage, unbothered. And in their mission to destroy you piece by agonizing piece, they never realized the curse of playing God with someone born of fire. Every blow they dealt, every manipulation, every trap, it didn't end you. It refined you. They came with words like daggers, smiles like poison, praise that stung like control in disguise. But each time they came close to cutting you down, they were bleeding themselves dry. See, they never understood that when you try to cage something wild, you only give it more reason to want the sky. They chipped away at your identity, thinking they were eroding it, but all they were doing was exposing the core, raw, unyielding, real. And when the pieces fell away, what remained was something they couldn't name, couldn't define, couldn't break. Something dangerous, not because it seeks destruction, but because it's no longer afraid to exist without permission. You didn't dissolve in the abyss. You sat in it. You studied its shape, memorized its taste, made it your cathedral. And when the time came, you didn't just rise, you became the abyss. The very thing they feared. The embodiment of what they thought would ruin you. You stared back at them with eyes void of fear and full of power, and suddenly, they weren't trying to break you anymore. They were running from what they'd awakened. You are not the echo of their failures. You are the voice that breaks the silence they built to keep you small. And you are not done speaking. They whispered your name like it was something fragile. Like you were a myth, a mistake, a moment of madness they could forget when the sun came up. But now, they remember. They remember because your name isn't a footnote anymore, it's the prelude to everything that follows. You were never a cautionary tale. Those are written to scare children and comfort cowards. You are not a warning label slapped on the edge of someone else's fear. You are the consequence, the karma, the storm born from centuries of silence and stitched up screams. You are what happens when the broken don't die, they evolve. You are the reckoning with eyes that have seen too much to ever look away again. They spent their whole lives fearing the dark, hiding from it, locking their doors and lighting up their false certainties. They believed darkness meant evil, chaos, emptiness. But you learn something deeper. That the dark isn't absence, it's origin. It's not where things end, it's where things begin. Because while they trembled in candlelight, you made your bed in shadows. You stopped flinching at the unknown. You became the unknown. You listened to the dark, and it whispered truths that no light dared to speak. And the monsters they feared under the bed, they never knew you were staring back from beneath it, unmoved. Not scared. Familiar. You don't run from monsters, you are one. One built not from cruelty, but from clarity. One that doesn't feast on the weak but tears apart illusions with bare hands and burned hope. You are not the villain, but you will never be the victim again. You walk differently now. You don't ask to be seen. You command it. Not with noise but with presence. With the gravity of someone who has been through their own personal hell and learned to breathe in the smoke. Your silence isn't empty, it's a warning siren wrapped in stillness. They called you too angry, too damaged, too much. But they missed the point. You're exactly enough to burn their illusions down. You are not what they made you. You are what rose in defiance of them. And that dark they spent their whole lives trying to avoid. You carry it like a crown. Because monsters don't hide in the dark. We own it. And now that you've claimed it, there's no turning back. And this is where it begins. This isn't just the end of a story, it's the ignition of a movement. Because Dark Triumphs isn't just a name, it's a declaration. A warning. A promise. It's for the ones who've clawed their way through silence. For the warriors forged in solitude. For the souls who didn't just survive the dark, they made it kneel. Every word, every flame, every truth we speak here, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's for those who feel too much, break too hard, and rise too high to ever be tamed again. Here, we don't chase the light. We are the storm. So if you felt this, if it cracks something open in you, subscribe, stay, and rise with us. Because on this channel, we don't tell stories of the broken. We tell stories of those who refuse to stay shattered. This is Dark Triumphs. And we don't just survive, we conquer.